Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, March 7, 2023 meeting of the Edina City Council. It is 7:04 p.m. Some of you may be watching this meeting on cable TV or edinamn.gov live meetings or on facebook.com/edinamn. This is a manner by which we're communicating with our residents in a couple of different ways, either in person at City Hall or virtually. And there are certainly opportunities for you to participate if you are tuning in live with us. You can participate in community comment, and you can also participate in a couple of public hearing matters that we have this evening. And the number is up on the screen just as a forewarning. We come up on community comment fairly quickly in the agenda, so you should be writing this number down along with the conference PIN number. Press star 1 to speak to an operator, and then you'll be brought in to speak to the council. And then we'll get to a couple of public hearing matters later on, and there will be a chance for you to participate there as well. So having provided that information, let's call the meeting to order, and I'll ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. And now we have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Is there anyone that wishes to modify the agenda in any form or fashion? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Pierce seconds the approval of the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are at community comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Andy Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. Just wanted to bring the council's attention, given everything that's happened in East Palestine, Ohio, with the freight derailment that pretty much took out of town, and regarding what we have on the Dan Patch line just outside our front door here, basically. That line, the route actually goes back to 1914, and TC&W, thank you, completed repairs on the Dan Patch swing bridge down in Savage about 2007. But even more importantly, Met Council has almost completed a massive train bridge that connects the east-west line north of Methodist Hospital to the Dan Patch, which would allow them to take, well, any freight carrier to take much more freight down through Edina. So Edina has 4 at-grade vehicle intersections that are essentially have no arm bars and have very little signage and a little bit of lights. And going from left to right, A through D, Dewey Hill Road near Edina Public Works, 49th and Brookside Avenue, which is in Todd Park, right out here, Brookside Terrace and Brookside Avenue in Todd Park, and then a private drive between St. Louis Park border and Brookside Terrace, also in the Todd Park neighborhood. So none of these intersections would be really, really good if there's a huge long freight train coming through there, and heavens to goodness if there's anything hazardous on that train as well. What action should the city council do to protect Edina residents and property from potentially having a long-term situation there? I think we need to get in with our local representatives at the county, state, and federal, because obviously there's a lot of government agencies that are involved with railroads for funding for those following safety improvements at those 4 intersections. And then safety fencing along the entire line of the CP property line that goes through Edina. And then it's my understanding that the state of Minnesota only has about 3 or 4 actual rail inspectors. So we really need to push to see if we can get more rail line inspection. It's a Class 3 railroad, so they don't really do that very often as compared to something that goes through downtown Minneapolis. But we have a lot of density that's going in against the rail line right now at Grandview neighborhood, so it would be important for those residents to know that things are still going good. And then I kind of look back at the airplane noise meeting presentation that the council used to get. I don't know if that's still going on at every meeting, but sort of a quarterly update from staff that might include what's going on in other cities along the line, north and south of us, that would affect us regarding that. Safety upgrades, seeing where we can get safety improvements made, tracking of hazardous materials. So the rail companies really don't have to tell you what's going on, what they're shipping. So it might take staff time, an intern literally watching what the train does as it goes by and what they're carrying, so that we get a better idea of what's going on. So I only know I've got 3 minutes, but I thought it would be more important to know that we've got those 4 intersections out there, and they are. If there's any more freight that comes down that line, it could be a real problem. So, thank you,
Mr. Brown. Really appreciate you putting this PowerPoint together, and your comments couldn't be more timely. I just came back from a meeting this past weekend of the U.S. Conference of Mayors leadership team, and we talked about rail safety, and there's a new Rail Safety Act that's being proposed as a result of the derailment in East Palestine, Illinois, or Ohio, excuse me. And there, just to let you know and let the rest of us know, that there is a couple of different programs at the FRA. One is a $5 billion program grant for consolidated rail infrastructure and safety improvements, so-called CRISI grants, which would cover fencing. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors is now working with potential applicants on these resources, as is the FRA. So that's something we can take a look at from a city standpoint. And then there's another $3 billion for railroad crossing elimination projects. So I don't know if we can eliminate them, but at least we can get cross arms on them.
Yep.
And I'm sure that that's a possibility as well. So the timing is good, and those are both programs designed for municipalities. So we'll ask our staff to take a look at those.
I'm sure the property values have gone down substantially in eastern Ohio after what happened. So I would hate to see anything similar happen to our efforts here in Edina. So.
Yeah, but thanks for that.
So.
All right. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them? All right, let's go online here and see if we have anyone that's wishing to talk to the council about a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing.
We do not currently have anyone online, but I do recommend that we wait 1 minute before proceeding because there is a slight delay in the broadcast. So I will come back to you here in 1 minute or when we have a caller, whichever is sooner.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, it's been 1 minute and we still do not have any callers, so I think it is safe to proceed.
All right, thank you very much. Our practice is to have our city manager comment on items that might have been raised as concerns of residents in the prior city council meeting. Is there anything you wish to discuss this evening, Manager Neal?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, there is. We had one community comment at our previous meeting, the last meeting in February, from Janie Weston, and she had a question about the HVAC improvements in this building. So I did have a chance to talk with our facilities manager, and this is what he said. Following the CDC recommendations on upgrades to air filters, we have upgraded ours to a minimum of MERV, M-E-R-V, of 14. were implemented in all city buildings, including those in City Hall. In addition to the high-efficiency air filters and the outside or fresh air in the buildings, the amount of change that happens was increased to promote better ventilation and humidity levels during the winter months, and that occurred in 2021.
Good. Thanks for that. That prompt any questions from council members? All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. I know Member Risser wanted to remove items 6E and F for a little bit further discussion. Anybody else on the council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right, hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion with the exception of items 6E and F?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Member Risser, second by Member Jackson to approve the items on the consent agenda with the exception of items 6E and F. Any further discussion?
I think that the items, if I recall, were C and E.
Actually, a correction, I did want E and F.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, yep, thanks for that. We had that little conversation here right before the meeting started. All right, we've got a motion to adopt the consent agenda items in a single motion with the exception of items 6E and F. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we will go to item 6E, which is the potential approval of an encroachment agreement with the property owners at 6604 Indian Hills Road. And Member Risser, go ahead.
I don't know if it would be possible to get the graphic of that encroachment request so that we could look at that. My primary concerns are that we do have code in place that instructs people that they cannot encroach into easement area. And so I'm kind of questioning why we would grant this. The other thing, it does look as if it's a pretty extensive area that is being requested. It is right along a road, and there is a curve in the road. So I am concerned about that. And I'm also wondering if this is going to be something that will then result in many, many other residents coming forward and asking that they too can have easements. And so those are my primary concerns.
Yep, it's not an easement though, it's an
Or
encroachment.
an encroachment,
Yep.
yes. Excuse me.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor,
Director
members of council. So this is the graphic of the encroachment. So the portion that follows the street is an existing fence. So fences built in the right-of-way are not allowed, but it's very common. People put fences up. When we looked at this one, we looked at the sight lines, we looked at public utilities. We have no current concerns or needs here, or we don't see any current concerns with private utilities in this area. So we would not have any concern with this from a sight lines or a public utility standpoint. The other thing that's in there on this corner is we own the adjacent lot. So this lot, pretty standard, about the same width as this one. It's access into Indian Head Lake. We have some storm sewer pipes that are on the other side of that lot. So again, we don't have any concerns here with the two pillars, and there's a gate that goes across the driveway. So we don't have any concerns with the encroachment now or any future plans that we have in this area. Within the encroachment agreement, if it is in the way, we can ask to have it removed at that time.
So my understanding is they would like to do other improvements that would be in this area.
These are already in place and completed.
It looked like there were going to be more improvements. There's not going to be more?
Everything's done.
Everything's done?
Yep,
Okay.
correct.
By codifying this, though, are we opening doors? Are we going to get more requests? Why are they asking for this if indeed this is something that is common?
It was between the buyer and the seller of the property, and they saw this during the title search, and they wanted it legally identified for that property sale.
Okay.
We usually get one of these a year, roughly. Sometimes it's for heated driveways. Somebody wants to heat their driveway in the right-of-way. Sometimes the fence is slightly off, things like that. So it's not a very common occurrence, and I wouldn't be concerned about this opening up for other properties.
Okay. I have no more questions. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good. Those are good questions. I mean, I think it was the gate was encroaching on city property, and it had to be resolved with between the buyer and the seller. We had Mr. Kendall working on it. They each had lawyers, a buyer and a seller, and they worked out the appropriate language. But most importantly, Director Milner had no problem with the issues that Member Risser raised. So it seems like it's something comfortable to do. Member Risser, do you care to move that matter, or you want somebody else to
I would
move
like
it?
somebody else to move the
All right.
matter.
Does someone on the council wish to move the approval of the encroachment agreement with 6604 Indian Hills Road?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Agnew, second by Member Pierce, to approve the encroachment agreement recommended by staff at 6604 Indian Hills Road. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the encroachment agreement at 6604 Indian Hills Road, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain?
I'm going to vote against this, nay.
All right.
Thank you.
With 4 ayes, 1 nay, motion passes. The encroachment agreement is approved. Thanks, everybody. I know that there was some pressure involved here because the property was supposed to close the end of the month, so it was important to get this addressed. And with staff having a high level of comfort on this, it was something that I developed comfort with over the week as well. Traffic safety report, Member Risser, there's something there that's concerning you?
Right, it is the report about, I believe it's B3, the gravel road, Brookside Terrace. And in the notes by staff, it said they could not measure speed because it was a gravel road, and residents appear to be looking for signage that would reduce speeding in that area. And I'm also concerned, I'm grateful for our public comment tonight, because this is also the road that leads to one of the very minimally marked crossings, railroad crossings. So there's a couple of things going on here. And I'm wondering, since we can't measure speed on this gravel road, residents are requesting signage. Could we possibly put in signage to discourage speeding?
So I can take that one too. So we were able with cameras to measure the volume of traffic. So I think it said 22 average daily traffic, 22 or 33, so very low volumes. But with that footage, our traffic safety coordinator looks at the actions of those vehicles. If he can see if they're driving inappropriately, if he thinks there's high speed based on the video. He brought that to the traffic safety, and he said there was no indication of speeding or unruly traffic driving through that gravel road that would warrant additional signage in that location for those 6 homes or 7 homes or so. So that's why staff didn't recommend additional signage.
Okay. It's confusing reading that they can't measure speed. So that they can visually, they can sort of see if it looks like people are speeding.
You measure speed with tubes, and those are rubber tubes, and when they're in gravel, they get wrecked and they pop open, so the equipment doesn't work. But we do take video where we can count.
Okay.
And just look at the driver behaviors on that video.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions with regard to this matter? Member Risser, do you want to move adoption of the traffic safety report of January 31, 2023? Okay. Never mind. Would someone move the traffic safety report of January 31, 2023?
So moved.
Member Pierce moves.
Second.
Member Jackson seconds the adoption of the traffic safety report of January 31, 2023. Any further discussions? All those in favor of adoption of the traffic safety report of January 31, 2023, say aye. 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 Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. All right, we're on to now the public hearing matters that we have in front of us this evening. There are 2 matters in that category, and the first one involves U.S. Internet, and Director Teague has this matter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This project was originally scheduled for the Planning Commission back on February 22nd. That was the night of the big snowstorm. So unfortunately, we had to cancel the meeting. So this project was continued to the March 15th meeting of the Planning Commission. Originally, it was scheduled for a public hearing this evening. So what the request is this evening is to continue this item to your March 21st meeting. Planning Commission will make a recommendation at their meeting on March 15th.
Did you want to do what you usually do, is to provide for some ability to comment on the interim basis, or do you?
It is posted on Better Together. We have received some comments, so there will be a Better Together report attached to this project.
So you're going to take comments all the way up to the March 21 meeting?
Oh, yes. We have updated the website and noted that the public hearing, yes, that comments could be taken up to at least March 21st, and we would probably continue that to our standard procedure where you would make a decision at the second meeting. So,
Okay, so we're just going to continue the public hearing for now?
yeah, the
Okay,
request
I'm
is
with
just
you.
correct.
All right, very good. Any questions for Director Teague? Is there a motion to continue the public hearing in this matter to March 21, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Member Agnew moves, Member Jackson seconds the continuation of the public hearing on the conditional use permit and variance request by U.S. Internet to the March 21, 2023 City Council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then Director Teague has the next matter as well, and that's a potential certificate of appropriateness appeal, 4630 Drexel Avenue. Somewhat the same issue.
It is, yes. We set this meeting up for this evening. The applicant was able to attend originally, but now is unable to, so he is requesting that the item be continued to April 4th. And he has also extended the 60-day review period waiver, so we're okay on the timeline.
All right, very good. Is there a motion to continue the public hearing to April 4th, 2023 on Resolution 2023-20, which is seeking a certificate of appropriateness on an appeal basis for 4630 Drexel Avenue?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Pierce seconds. The motion is stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we're on to recommendations and reports. And let's get Resolution 2023-21 up in front of us. So we've got several donations this reporting period. Is there a motion to accept, this is 8A, the Resolution 2023-21, which accepts donations made to the City of Edina. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-21?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Agnew seconds the adoption of Resolution 2023-21. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-21, accepting donations on behalf of the City of Edina, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And for this reporting period, we've got several donations to the Senior Center, Trader Joe's, 15 beautiful flower bouquets, Cremation Society of Minnesota provided lunch for 18 people over at its lunch and learn funeral planning class. SeniorCommunities.guide had lunch for 27 people on a lunch and learn staying at home instead class that they had. And then Cassia, which moved into the commercial industrial neighborhood a couple years ago now, I think had lunch for 20 people. Take in knowledge, take home lunch, part 1, wills, powers of attorney and healthcare. And then Herself Health had lunch for 12 people, lunch and learning, aging loved ones, how to have a heart-to-heart with aging loved ones. So thanks for all those in-kind donations. And then the police department received a grant for 2 mobile fingerprint scanners, almost $6,000 from the Edina Crime Prevention Fund. Thanks to the Edina Crime Prevention Fund for that generous donation. So those names of those donors will all be posted on the city website. Now, the next matter in front of us is the, Mr. Scipione has this matter. I don't think he's going to have his assistant do this.
I do have an assistant, just not the one you're thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'm joined tonight by Chris Brown of the Transportation Commission, who is the lead commissioner on this work plan initiative. So for some background, the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund, or the PACS Fund, is a special revenue fund for utility franchise fees. The PACS Fund generates roughly $1.2 million a year, and that money is dedicated exclusively to the creation, maintenance, and improvements of non-motorized transportation facilities. So that includes sidewalks, bikeways, trails, and pedestrian crossings. This is just a table of the current rates. So the franchise fees are imposed on customers of Xcel Energy and CenterPoint Energy, and they're broken down to, there's a residential rates, and then there's varying levels of commercial rates. So you can see on the right side the total monthly rates. On the residential levels, just under $6 a month, or about $70 a year. And then the commercial side ranges from about $117 a year to $1,400 a year. These fees generate a total revenue of about $2.18 million, and that revenue is split between the PAX fund and the Conservation and Sustainability Fund, or the CAS fund. So the PAX fund gets about 55%, and the CAS fund gets 45%.
Yes,
evening,
Commissioner Brown, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I appreciate the time to quickly discuss here the work plan item that I worked on last year. Just some brief background. Chose to pursue this work plan item because almost every single commission meeting that we have every month, been serving for 2 years so far, someone from the community comes and desires a sidewalk, crosswalk, improved safety to walk, bike, roll across Edina. And so one way to do that is obviously increase funding opportunities to more quickly implement that infrastructure. So as a part of that, reviewed potential scenarios for a one-time increase in the fee. The first option would be a tiered option, which would increase rates across the residential and 3 commercial properties. The other one was proposed to hold the residential rate and raise the 3 commercial rates instead. And so you can kind of see the variations and increases based upon that percentage at the bottom increase in that fee. The commission discussed this over 2 meetings and decided upon a one-time increase that balanced the residential burden and the commercial burden. So as you can see on the left, there's the current breakdown, and on the right is the proposed breakdown. So currently there's a much larger burden on residential owners than commercial owners, and so we felt more of a 50-50 split was fair, with a small increase for residents of about $1 per month, which seemed, given that this hasn't been raised in quite a while, given ongoing increases in materials and labor, it seemed fair to increase this as much as appropriate within reason. And finally, we hope to double the PAX fund to complete the planned infrastructure identified in the master plan, the pedestrian bicycle master plan. So as you can see on the right there, under current funding scenarios, it would take nearly 50 years. We're hoping to have that by this one-time increase to just over 20, which would then build those 4 items in the bottom: 30 miles of sidewalk, 45 miles of on-street bicycle infrastructure, 20 miles of paths, and several improved pedestrian crossings. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner.
So with the commission recommendation, there are several guiding documents and objectives that staff feels that it meets. Main one being the Climate Action Plan's recommendation to accelerate the building of on and off street protected bike lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks. As Commissioner Brown noted, having more funding would allow us to accelerate the construction of these facilities. In addition, the commission's recommendation supports the pedestrian and bicycle master plan's objectives to increase the number of Edina residents, workers, and visitors who walk or bike for transportation, health, fitness, and recreation, as well as the comprehensive plan objectives to implement a fully multimodal transportation system, improve mobility with a balanced system, and reduce the dependence on single occupancy vehicles. The city's authority to impose or raise the franchise fees is dictated by our franchise agreements with CenterPoint and Xcel. Generally, the rates need to be increased equally between the 2 utilities. So if you notice from the table before, the rates were the same for each utility. The fees can be increased by an ordinance, which can be enacted after notice has been provided to the utilities. So in the case of CenterPoint Energy, that notice period is 60 days. For Xcel Energy, it's 90 days. And the fees have previously been increased in 2015, 2018, and 2019. So given the procedural requirements for increasing the fees, staff feels that there are other considerations that should be looked at. For example, as I mentioned before, the franchise fees also generate revenue for the CAS fund. In addition, there's been talk recently about the needs for maintenance and repair of our street lighting system, and the franchise fees are potentially a revenue source for that. The staff report that was presented at a work session a few months ago, I believe, identified about $565,000 a year for 25 years to keep up with that infrastructure. In addition, with the new sidewalk inspection program, there's been discussion about having those repairs funded by the city. And again, the franchise fees and the PAX fund is potentially a revenue source for that. So with those considerations, staff feels that we would like further discussion and direction from council on all of the desired uses for the franchise fees and how those could impact potential rate increases. So we would look to discuss those with council at either a work session or a council retreat. We just feel that the city should consider any and all potential uses of the franchise fees before we proceed with making a rate adjustment. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Yeah, a really good report. Thank you for that, both of you. Questions from council members? Comments? Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when you say a one-time increase, does that mean just 1 year? What does one-time mean?
Do you want to speak to that?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so one time would mean a one-time increase that would carry through in perpetuity until it was either raised again or considered for a change. So it'd be, instead of being raised annually, it would just be raised the one time upon approval and then would carry through until reviewed again. So,
Okay, so it would stay in place once it was raised?
Yep,
Okay.
just like it has previously where it's been at the same level since it was enacted in 2013?
Yep, 2012.
2012, sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you. And then the other question, it's probably for Mr. Scipione or maybe even Mr. Milner. If we get this massive increase in money, it sort of looks like almost doubling it or doubling it, we've been doing the sidewalks with the street reconstruction project. My question is that going to get this out of sync? So we're doing sidewalks before we do a street reconstruction, or how is the timing of that work going to work?
Sure, thank you for the question. So with the recently approved, the equity criteria that we have, we will still use that to prioritize projects. And some of those projects are still going to align with our street reconstruction projects, but others will not. So we'll have to, if we got that additional funding, we as staff would have to balance out our, how much workload we're able to take for the year, how many projects we're able to construct with that funding. Does that answer your question?
And I'll add one thing, and we know if the math on the screen says 21 more years, that's approximately how many more years we need to finish out all the streets in town.
Okay.
So if we know which streets need sidewalks that haven't been reconstructed, we'll wait till they score high enough to just be part of the street reconstruction program, because that's where we get the biggest bang for the dollar.
Well, that was my
Yeah.
point.
Yep.
That was my
So
question.
the line's pretty well from the timing
Okay,
standpoint.
great. That answered my question. Thank you both. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Member Pierce?
Just two questions, and both of these are just for clarity. One, and I think it might be slide 3, the one where you had the table with the rates. There we go. What's the difference between commercial A, B, and C?
Thank you for the question. So my understanding of the difference is it has to do with the volume of the utility that they're using, electricity or gas in this case.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question, and this is more to the mechanics of how the rate, we've got residential and commercial, and it's being assessed through the utility. So what's the mechanics of how this gets collected?
I think Manager Neal, would you like to answer that?
I will. Thank you. The mechanics of how this gets collected is that it is assessed on the actual customer bill. So if you look at your customer bill, you will see a franchise fee somewhere down on the bottom of that charge. You pay, the customer pays the utility company aggregates all of those payments, and they pay us via check. We get a check from them for a monthly payment.
Okay. And so I asked that just to understand if we're raising the rates that commercial pays, does that eventually filter down to the resident? And so that was where I was Just trying to understand the mechanics there.
I mean, it becomes an operating cost of that business, so
Yeah.
theoretically, it does. In the sense that all businesses pass their costs on to their customers.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the things that I would be interested in when we discuss this further is really just trying to understand the expense for the resident. And this is more from, again, more of a equity conversation, because I would want to make sure we're saying that we want to be fair and equal. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be raising the rate for the resident if commercial is then passing the increase along to the resident for those utilities. And so I just want to try to understand those little nuances in the mechanics of how this gets, how it gets assessed.
Well, one of the interesting things about franchise fees is that they do introduce a new level of equity and equality in that nonprofits pay franchise fees.
Yeah.
So school district pays, hospitals pay, churches pay, people or entities that don't pay property taxes do pay franchise fees.
Yeah, so I want to look at those nuances as we move forward. So thank you.
Yep.
Other members have questions? Okay. Yeah, I think it's important to look at all these things, including this issue of preservation of the systems we create, Just like we're doing now, you've hired someone to inspect the sidewalks, and we're going around and deciding what sidewalks we need to replace, and, section by section. I think that's something worthy of discussion by the council, whether that should be included as a PAX fund expense as opposed to an individual resident expense. Especially since it's part of our sidewalk system. So is there a motion to direct staff to schedule a work session with the city council or a city council retreat in 2023 to discuss the desired uses of franchise fee revenue and potential rate increases with the appropriate staff and the Transportation Commission?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to adopt the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried? All right, now we're back to...
Thank you.
Thank you. We're back to Director Teague. Matter we had in front of us last meeting, and there were some questions raised with regard to 4404 Valley View Road, which is the old Burley's Hair Salon site, which was approved on a final basis for a 4-unit townhouse complex, and there's been some issues that have come up, I think, raised during the course of the conversation at the last city council meeting that have caused our city attorney and Director Teague to visit about what things might be important to be thinking about here, as opposed to just going forward tonight with this resolution 2023-16, which would create these individual parcels, or it would subdivide that property into 4 pieces, each containing a townhouse. So, Director Teague, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the action that we are requesting this evening is to continue action on the subdivision to the April 4th meeting. The applicant is agreeable to that continuance, as mentioned by the mayor, in order to address some of the issues that were raised at the public hearing and since. The 2 issues, the first is the concern about future commercial use on the site. And second is a city code provision that requires no residential use on the first floor or basements of a PCD 1 property. So the city attorney is recommending that we resolve these issues by going through a residential PUD rezoning process. So what that would entail is a rezoning of the site, again, to a residential PUD. In that PUD ordinance, commercial use would specifically not be allowed by city code. Multifamily residential would be the only use that would be allowed. And again, the residential use would be allowed on the first floor with the establishment of that new PUD. The PUD zoning would only allow the development that was approved by the council, as the mayor mentioned, by the council back in 2021, along with the variances and the site plan that went along with it. And again, it would not allow the commercial use. Public hearing would be scheduled for the Planning Commission to consider the public hearing, or to consider that request at their March 29th meeting, with the public hearing on the rezoning then scheduled for the City Council on April 4th. All of this can be accomplished within the 60-day rule. So the action, and the council could take action on April 4th on those items. So the action requested this evening, again, as agreed upon with the applicant, is to continue action on the subdivision to April 4th.
And the applicant is comfortable with that, is that what you said?
That is correct.
All right, so the motion would actually be to continue the action on this subdivision matter on 4404 Valley View Road to April 4th, 2023, in order to address the issues raised during the sense public hearing, and that is concerns about future commercial use on the site and the city code provision that requires no residential use on the first floor or basements of a PCD1 property. Is that
That's correct.
succinctly stated? Okay. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce, that we continue action on this matter, this subdivision request at 4404 Valley View Road to our April 4th, 2023 meeting for the reasons stated. Any further discussion?
I do have some things to discuss.
Sure.
Because this is a 0.27 acre, small triangularly shaped lot, and subdividing it into 4 parcels, I think maybe we need to have that dialogue and perhaps separate these 2 issues. With the subdivision, we are creating a lot that would have, somewhere between 150 and 200 square feet of buildable area. That's very small. And the lots that we would be creating do not reflect the lot size in the area. We have never created lot sizes this small. And to go through creating or moving down the path to a PUD for this action, I think just really does not make sense. The other thing is the PUD would create a zone where we would have a type of construction that doesn't have to meet our residential requirements. It wouldn't have to have that pervious surface. So it's really moving in the wrong direction, particularly for this part of Edina that is already known as not having enough tree coverage, being one of those heat zones and all of that. So I do really have strong reservations about heading down this path, and I think maybe we should just wrestle with, is this a logical thing to subdivide this very tiny little parcel into 4?
Director Teague, any comment about the PUD?
In regard to the subdivision and creating the lots, the other option for the applicant would be to not do the subdivision, and 4 units could be built on the site. They could be rental. So the idea in subdividing is so that they could be sold off individually as owner-occupied units.
Well, they could also be condominium, I think.
They could do it through a condominium plat as well, where the individual lots would be drawn around each unit, and then there would be essentially an association that would take care of the lawns and all the area around the units.
So, so I wrote to you this afternoon, Councilmember Agnew may have a point here. She had her hand up in the air.
You asked the question I was going to,
Yeah,
so thank
okay.
you, Mayor.
All right. So, when we had this conversation last meeting, it was about whether or not we wanted to create for this subdivision an ability to be able to have, or for this parcel, 4 different townhouses on separate subdivisions, so you could buy and sell a townhouse. To me, for the neighborhood, it makes no sense to have those as rentals. They'd be unbelievably high, expensive rentals, and I don't think a condominium association in this kind of a setting is appropriate either. So as we try, I asked the question, how do we get ourselves in this position? Because we got a finally approved project that we had a CUP, a conditional use permit for in a PCD1 district that we were told would accommodate residential use. Member Risser raised some questions about it, and now it's coming back to us, and we're being told that, well, the smart thing to do is to make it a PUD and to make sure that nobody could use those first floor areas for purposes, or the basements for purposes of commercial usage. And I think the developer told us that they would, in their HOA documents, and in fact, for the documents for, I think, Edina Flats, there is commercial use prohibited. And they're going to have commercial use prohibited in their HOA documents, which will be recorded at the county, and it'll run with the property for the rest of time. So to me, I see this as an accommodation to satisfy a potential legal requirement on a project that we've already approved. And to me, it makes all the sense in the world to have them be separate townhouses that can be bought and sold by people. It's consistent with what we decided to do in the first place. So if we're going to go this, I guess we're going to decide whether we're going to go the route that our city attorney recommends, but I don't think it'd be wise to get into a conversation 2 weeks from now, about whether they should be rentals, condos, or townhouses. And I don't care if we resolve that issue tonight or not, but I think it should be resolved either tonight or 2 weeks from now. And Member Risser argues that, I guess you want them to be either condos or rentals.
To be frank, this whole process leaves me very concerned, because this is basic code. And I believe this project, it should have been screened. We should have identified this problem months ago. The other thing is, this project has continued to move forward, and one of the callers who called in last week noted that it had been given so many things. And I think we need to look at our process really hard, very carefully. The reason it got the setbacks that it did was predicated on setback variances that were granted to the first project that would have had underground parking and one single entrance onto the site. And the whole reason for giving it those setback variances was because it cut back on driveways into the site. So I know I'm going down a path of the history of this, but we need to do a very serious analysis of how we got here in the first place and why we missed this, why this was not caught early on in the process. And also this idea that you can simply grant setback variances that a previous project has had. I think that's a concern. I am concerned this idea of making it a PUD is something that concerns me as well, because it is such a small site and we are creating such a unique kind of use. And, are we getting into spot zoning? I don't know. It'd be great if we could look at our zoning map and just see all the areas with the PUD zoning and, consider that as well. But I kind of feel as if I've had a curveball thrown here, and I really don't feel like I'm prepared to vote on this issue tonight. This is a lot for a little tiny parcel. So there's that.
Let me go to Attorney Kendall. What about this subdivision issue? Can we resolve that tonight, or can we resolve it 2 weeks from now? What's your advice there?
Well, Mr. Mayor, they've applied to subdivide the property. The council can approve or deny that application. They have put forth some documents, including a declaration showing that it'll be residential property upon subdivision and how that's going to work. So if the council approves the zoning when that comes before you, the PUD zoning, in my opinion, the subdivision is harmonious with that PUD zoning. The council could attempt to dictate to them exactly how they set up their common interest community, but realistically, any of the options, whether it's townhouse or condominium, those are all potentially viable options for them, and they'd all involve a declaration on the title to the properties that would require them to be continued to be used as residential, unless and until that residential homeowners association was somehow dissolved. But I think that would take a large vote of all the members, plus probably input from their mortgage lenders, because they're going to have equity in those properties as well. So it seems somewhat unlikely to me that they would apply, market, sell this residential development and then try to change that in the future into a commercial development. It's certainly possible. It's theoretically possible, but it doesn't seem likely to me. So I think the council is relatively safe in, if you approve the zoning that would permit this type of use, then permitting the subdivision that goes along with that seems like a relatively safe move to me.
So deal with both those issues, one embedded in the other, at our next meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
as a practical matter, the
we're going to have a
council.
public hearing on March, actually not the next meeting, it's March, I guess, March 29th. So it's a public hearing at the council on April 4th. So it goes back to the planning commission.
Correct.
On March 29th, and then on to the city council on April 4th.
Correct. And then at that time, the council will have before it both the zoning issue and the subdivision issue. And the council can vote on both those issues. I mean, they could be handled independently of each other, but, honestly, they do kind of go together. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to approve one and not the other. But both those issues will be before you. You can debate them. You can vote on them however you please at that April 4th meeting.
Member Risser.
They do need to get signage up on the site saying that it's being considered for subdivision and rezoning, true?
Yeah, I can respond to that, yes. So they would be required to put up our standard rezoning sign. That needs to be up at least 9 days in advance of the Planning Commission public hearing.
Do they need a sign indicating that the land is going to be subdivided or up for subdivision as well?
We could have them do that too, yes.
I think that's in our code.
All right, any further discussion? We've got a motion to continue the action on the subdivision, potential subdivision on 4404 Valley View Road to the April 4, 2023 City Council meeting. And it would go back to as a public hearing to the Planning Commission on March 29, 2023, with the public hearing for the City Council on April 4, 2023. Any further conversation on that motion as made by Member Jackson, seconded by Member Pierce? Okay. All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
Carried. Okay. Now we are on to a matter that Director Teague has as well, and that is the old public works site, 5146 Eden Avenue. And this is potential approval of a preliminary development site plan for that location for the restaurant that would be part of that overall concept. Director Teague?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of council, as mentioned, there is a resolution before you for the preliminary approval. The plan is consistent with the overall PUD that was approved for the site that includes the senior co-op to the south, the 86-unit co-op, the restaurant, and then the park on the north end. The Planning Commission reviewed this, held a public hearing, and their recommendation is for approval. That vote was 4-1. This project, as well as the senior project, still needs to come back to the City Council for final approval. As mentioned, this is a preliminary approval. The park portion will come back to the HRA for final design of the park and funding. So staff and the Planning Commission are recommending that you adopt Resolution 2023-17. And the applicants are here to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Director Teague or the applicant, Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last time we talked about snow and snow storage, and I wondered if you'd had a chance to talk to your architect any about that. Yeah, please.
And identify yourself when you come up too, would you please?
Hello, everyone. Brent Frederick with Chester Concepts. Address is 5108 Blake Road South, Edina. No, we hadn't, and my apologies for that. I did not think that was something we needed to have answered by tonight, so my apologies. That's my fault.
All
So
right.
I did not get an answer for that.
So that plus my second question, I think maybe Mr. Teague, you can answer this. So in the course of what we're approving tonight, we have time to talk about that. And then also the other question is about the alcohol on the site. We've got that open space, and I don't know how in other establishments that have outdoor alcohol, if we need to have a fence or anything like that, how the city handles that. Is that stuff that's going to be ironed out between now and final approval?
Yeah, so some of the things that we can, yes, we can. So the snow removal, we can have that answer when they come back for final. The area that's fenced around that outdoor dining area, that could be addressed through the liquor license as well.
Okay.
And there's also some outstanding issues about handicap accessibility, getting from the parking ramp across the bridge and into the park and the site. So those issues that we're still working through with the building official, the fire marshal.
Okay, and we'll get that at final approval?
Yes.
Well, with the liquor, that will be with the liquor license?
As far as the barriers to the outdoor dining, yes.
Okay, so that's not part of the zoning then?
Right.
Okay, terrific. Thank you both very much.
Isn't the accessibility issue more of a park issue than a restaurant issue?
It is. It's involved with the restaurant because the overflow parking, we're utilizing the Jerry's parking ramp, so we want to make sure that there's handicap accessibility through the park as well.
Good. Glad you'll have that addressed by final. Other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-16, which is the subdivision request and the preliminary approval request, preliminary development site approval request for, wait a minute, it's 2023-17, not 16. Yes. Excuse me, I'll restate the motion. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 2023-17, which would approve the preliminary development site plan for 5146 Eden Avenue relative to the Jester's Restaurant project?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce, to adopt the resolution 2023-17 as stated. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
I just
Member
want to
Jackson.
say, every time we look at this, I get more excited about this, and I thank you, Mr. Frederick, for your enthusiasm through this whole process, and it looks beautiful, and I'm excited, and you brought forward the discussion about the fire pit outside and everything, like, oh, that looks like so much fun. So every time I see it, it looks better, so thank you so much.
All right. Yes, Member Agnew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo Councilmember Jackson's excitement for this, but also add in, I did go back and watch the Planning Commission meeting, which I thought had a really great discussion around this. And I know that this is something that, I've been critical of kind of in its entirety as we're thinking about this public works site and the need to have a civic engagement center and draw people into this area, and feeling like this project as a whole is missing the mark on that. But we're down this path, and we are where we are, and I do believe that I share, right, in that excitement of what it is becoming for this site in particular. So want to just share my appreciation in that, and to echo Commissioner Bennett's, I will be begrudgingly supporting this, and just appreciate, again, the work that you've put into it.
Thank you. Member Regna. Member Ursa.
And one thing, as I was looking at it, and I really do appreciate hearing about how movement is being considered and, ADA and all of that, and looking at the pathways along with the stairs, and I know this is coming up, but thinking of directionality both to and from the bridge, the pedestrian bridge, and really being sure that somebody who is in a motorized scooter doesn't have to take a sharp turn. And this is going to be a really challenging project, the park component, and getting movement to flow through there. So I'm really interested in seeing what will come. So thank you.
Good. Thank you for those comments. Any further comments? All right. All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-17, which would approve the preliminary development site plan for 5146 Eden Avenue and the Jester's Concepts project, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right. Very good. Mr. Fredericks, thanks for being here this evening. And we saw each other downtown at a celebrating a women event. That was kind of a cool event that they had down there. So, all right. Thanks for that. All right. Commission correspondence. I assume nothing has come in other than what we've already received. Manager's comments.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have three comments tonight, actually. I'm going to add one about the bonding bill, and then I'll talk about the Cornelia View apartment project in a second. But I would like to ask Mr. Kendall if he would give the council an update on the status of the tobacco ordinance litigation, because we have had a big announcement over the last week.
Thank you, Manager Neal. Just a little background for the council. We've all heard about the youth vaping epidemic. I personally have heard stories from my nieces and nephews about not wanting to go to the bathroom at their high schools because so many kids are vaping in there. There's obviously a big issue going on. The message, I think, has got out to kids that smoking cigarettes is bad for them, and a lot of kids are not doing that, but they are getting interested in vaping. Some kids, I think, have been led to believe that vaping is not bad for them or is not as bad as cigarette smoking. Vaping is not addictive. The addictive part is clearly not true. Nicotine is addictive, whether it's in cigarette form or vape form. So, and also, history indicates to us that flavored nicotine products can be and have been target marketed towards specific demographic groups. For example, in the 70s, starting in the 70s, menthol flavor was specifically targeted toward people of color and the black community. And now in the 2020s, fruit and candy flavored nicotine products have been target marketed toward younger users. You don't see a lot of mature adult cigarette smokers who've been smoking for many years seeking out candy flavored, fruit flavored vapes. It's pretty clearly targeted toward younger users. So in 2020, the city of Edina took action on that issue and passed an ordinance banning the sale of flavored nicotine products in the city. In response to this, a major multinational tobacco company sued the city in federal court, claiming that ordinance was preempted by the United States Tobacco Control Act. At that point, I advised the council at that time, the path of least resistance probably would have been to just repeal the ordinance and see if the Food and Drug Administration eventually took action on this issue. To its credit, the city did not do that. The city defended its position, stuck by that ordinance. So we went into federal district court in the District of Minnesota. The court ruled in the city's favor that the ordinance was not preempted by federal law. Following that, the tobacco company appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit, and that litigation took some time. So after approximately 2 years, last week the court ruled again in favor of the city of Edina, holding that the ordinance was not preempted by federal law and could stand. At the same time, there was a parallel case going on out of Los Angeles County, California, and they received their ruling from their federal appellate court slightly earlier than we did. In response to that, the tobacco company appealed to the United States Supreme Court. And on the same day last week that the Eighth Circuit ruled in favor of the city of Edina, the United States Supreme Court denied review of the case out of California. So that indicates to me that the two cases are based on substantially similar facts and issues. So that indicates to me that the United States Supreme Court is highly unlikely to accept review of the Edina case. So of course I'll advise the city if they do petition for review, but I consider that unlikely at this point. So in my opinion, the council in 2020 and subsequent councils, including this one, are to be commended for standing by that position and defending that ordinance. Edina chose to stand its ground on this issue and ultimately did prevail, unless and until they petitioned for review. And if they did, I consider it unlikely that petition would be accepted. So this opens the door for other cities and counties and states to take the similar action if they want to, try to protect public health and safety and prevent another generation from being addicted to nicotine. So it was my pleasure to represent the city on this issue, and I commend you for standing by this ordinance, and I congratulate you on your victory.
Yeah, Mr. Kendall, I thought you did superb legal work here. Reading the Eighth Circuit opinion, there were so many nuances on several different issues that could have turned the court a different direction. And because the arguments that were advanced in California and the arguments you advanced at the Eighth Circuit, I think were embraced by the Eighth Circuit, and Edina beats big tobacco. That's the bottom line. Edina beats big tobacco. And I tell you, when I was at this U.S. Conference of Mayors leadership meeting last weekend, I sat down for dinner on Saturday night. We had the tables spread out, and I sat down, and the guy sat down next to me. He looks at my name tag. He says, "You from Edina?" And I said, "Well, close." He said, "Well, I represent tobacco-free something or other." He said, "Edina just won a big case." And the Eighth Circuit, so it was out there amongst the people that are working in a tobacco-free environment. He happened to represent an organization that was dealing with kids. But so that was a little feather in your cap there, too. People are paying attention all over the country that care about this issue. So thanks for that. Other questions, comments? All right, on that issue? All right, back to Manager Neal. You got a couple other things
you,
I
David.
think you want to address.
Yes, a couple of you have asked me if I could prepare some remarks on the Cornelia View apartments, and so I'm going to do that. I have, and I'll just read them into the record tonight. During the week of February 13th, so a few weeks ago, residents in the Southdale neighborhood began to notice what appeared to them to be design modifications between the plans for the Cornelia View apartments approved by the City Council and what they were seeing being built on the construction site itself. Specifically, they noticed a larger fourth floor than what they were anticipating. Some of the residents expressed their concern to the city. An initial look at the project by city staff found what we called irregularities in what was being constructed compared to the renderings approved by the City Council in 2021. City staff immediately informed the development team of the issue and asked the project architect and construction contractor to determine the scale and scope of the differences. I informed the neighborhood that the city was working toward resolution of this matter by Thursday, February 23rd. After extensive discussion among city staff and with the project architects, staff confirmed that the design modifications being constructed at the site had indeed been approved as minor modifications during the 30/60/90 plan review process that occurred on January 8th, 2022, March 29th, 2022, and April 27th, 2022, all of which culminated with the issuance of the building permit for the project on August 2nd, 2022. City Code Section 36-130 allows the city planner to approve minor modifications to plans approved by the city council. Changes are considered minor if they meet all of the following 8 criteria. Number 1, there's no increase to the proposed number of dwelling units. Number 2, any proposed increase in floor area of structures on the site does not exceed 5% of gross floor area. Number 3, all proposed revisions comply with code requirements. Number 4, there is no change in any condition required in a site plan approval, including building materials and color. Number 5, the property is not located in an Edina Heritage Landmark District. Number 6, impervious surface does not increase by more than 5% unless it is to add required parking stalls to comply with the proof of parking. Number 7, there's no change to on-site circulation patterns or access to the site. And number 8, trees to be planted as part of the approved site plan may be relocated but not decreased in number. So the changes that occurred in this, the minor modifications that occurred in this project, all complied with those 8 requirements, or those 8 criteria. The City Council granted staff the discretion to approve minor modifications such as those that are at issue in this matter when they approved ordinance amendments to the City Code in 2012 and 2015. Criteria number 1 through 5 were included in Ordinance 2012-01, approved by the Council in 2012. Criteria 6 through 8 were added by the Council's approval of Ordinance 2015-07 in 2015. The purpose of these additions to the City Code was to reduce the number of minor design changes that had to be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission and City Council. The provisions also recognize the fact that field-level design changes are necessary and inevitable for an intangible concept to mature into an intricate plan and finally to become a tangible building. Earlier tonight, just a few minutes ago, the council approved a new restaurant to be built by Jester Concepts at 5146 Eden Avenue. The PUD resolution says it will be 13,500 square feet. I can promise you that after that concept goes through our plan review process and gets a building permit and gets into the construction process, the probability that it will be exactly 13,500 square feet is very low. It's going to be a little smaller, it's going to be a little bigger, but it will be within the parameters of what staff can approve without additional Planning Commission or City Council review. The design modifications observed by the neighborhood adjacent to the Cornelia View apartments were the removal of square footage on the second floor and the addition of square footage on the fourth floor. The net result of the approved minor changes is a very small decrease in the total square footage of the building. The design modifications in questions were approved by the city planner during the building permit review process because they fit the definition of the city's 8 criteria for minor modifications established by the City Council in City Code 36-130. The city heard the concerns of residents in the Southdale neighborhood on this matter. The city staff investigated those concerns and found that the construction matched approved plans and has been building code compliant at every step of the project. I appreciated the patience of the neighborhood as we looked into their concerns and also appreciated the cooperation we received from Pope Architects, Loopy Development, and Ecumen, not only to help us resolve this matter, but also to bring much needed affordable housing to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Member Risser. I don't think he's done reporting it, but go ahead. This was
okay. And I appreciate that. I have continued to hear concerns, particularly about how it appears the building is raised up on the structure that supports the parking is showing above ground, and it appears the plan is to bank the ground up, and so there are concerns regarding that. The other concern that I have is whether we may want to add something about building profile, and the change did modify the building profile, and it notes here that no change to any condition is required, including building materials and color, but if you're changing the outline, I just want to toss that out, and that might be something that we want to think about at a future date. The other thing is, as I read this, it says minor changes may be authorized by the planner only one time. And then all other plan modifications shall be acted on, reviewed, and processed by the commission and council in the same manner as they reviewed and processed the site plan. And I'm wondering if, the process could be a little more transparent and maybe the minor changes could be put on better together so that residents were aware of what had been approved, and we could kind of mitigate the feelings of surprise that happen. I think that would be helpful. And then if there, continues to be surprises, they would know. So it'd be great if we could get all of the changes that have been approved out there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Member Risser. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks, Manager Neal, for going through that. I was requesting that we do that for two reasons. One is to just take the opportunity to be able to talk through what the process is. And I think everybody will appreciate this. The various councils approve things, and we try to have continuity because we have the election cycles overlap. But a lot of these things are initiated and approved by different sets of elected officials. And so I think because of that, when you come into the cycle, like we all come into the cycle when we come into the cycle, right? And it just, you get a docket, and the docket is what it is. But we do have feedback from residents. And so one of the things I wanted to just make sure is we took the time to be transparent and document the process. And so I thank you for doing that. And then the other request I had, and I think we see this quite a bit where residents are interpreting what they're seeing and what they understood to be agreed to. And so I'll just use an example. I think this week we got the question about height. And so there were emails that said, well, this building is taller than it was supposed to be. And so I just think it's good for us to say, this is the height that was approved. This is the height that the building will be. And if it fits within the range, plus or minus X, Y, Z, we should just clarify that and just try to state the facts as the facts. And then the other example I kept using was setbacks. Right, that we were going around and around and around on what is a setback, where do you measure the setback from, and so just trying to find creative ways to ensure that people understand the facts are the facts. And then the third part to me about this is it is, as a council, like we're not, and this isn't a watchdog committee, right? We approve this. Right, whether we were here when it started or they're there when it ends. And so we're all a part of it. And I think sometimes being able to answer some of these questions and just talk through the history of where we are just helps me personally get comfortable with the cycle and the approvals as we move forward. And so I just think it's important to be able to acknowledge that as we move forward. So I appreciate you taking the time to go through that, and then Carrie, continuing to respond to these questions and doing so in as clear a manner as possible. I definitely appreciate that as well.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Manager Neal, I think from all of us for going through that report out on what occurred from a factual standpoint. I know when I drove by there from time to time, I thought, am I looking at this right? And I go look at the elevations, and part of the issue was it's a funny shaped lot. Mm-hmm. And so you get the orientation kind of messed up looking on paper versus looking at it in real time on the site. So I was really pleased our staff went through it so carefully and so meticulously. and with the architects from the developer, and Director Teague, from having been involved in situations where he's come back before and told us, well, this has got to be your decision, not mine. I know that he was very thorough and careful about looking at that ordinance and then making decisions on those 8 factors within the confines of what he deemed to be his authority. So I feel really comfortable with how it ended up. Thank you. Do you have something else?
I had one final thing, and that is to let you know the status of one of your legislative platform items, and that is we were seeking a $1 million appropriation from the state in the bonding bill, and that $1 million was going to be put toward the South Metro Public Safety Training Facility so that we had sufficient funding to actually do the project that we wanted to do. And that made it through the bonding bill process, so it is included in the House bill. That next steps is that it goes to the Senate, but we're in pretty good shape.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
That other issue we talked about today, did you want to address at all, the expenditures by council members, or no? Okay.
No. I did, yeah, right. I mean, I shared the facts of that. And
Okay, all right. Yeah, good. Okay, Member Risser, council comments.
Yes. I did go to training from the League of Minnesota Cities. It was very good and really so helpful to be together with elected officials from other municipalities. So that was a great opportunity, and I really appreciate it. I will be going to the Capitol on Thursday to participate in the day at the Capitol through the League of Minnesota Cities. So looking forward to that and staying busy. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I was at Edinburgh Park today, and if you have a little need for spring, they've got tulips and daffodils blooming indoors. So right here in Edina, we've got a little slice of spring. It was very exciting. The other matter I had is we actually heard from Evan Ramstead at our Rotary meeting, and then he wrote a sort of follow-up column in Sunday's paper. He said, as we are often asked, are there too many apartments being built in the Twin Cities? I've heard that question many times, and he had a really interesting article talking about the fact that no, we still have a housing shortage. We need about 18,000 units a year, and so it's right on par with what we need, and probably less than what we need. And I encourage everybody, if you're curious about that, to read the article because it was really informative and helpful. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Member Pierce. All right. Member Agnew, we know that you have at least one thing to talk about, and that was you were together on Sunday afternoon, last Sunday.
We were.
Or no, Sunday before, I guess.
Well, now you're quizzing me on the date, and I don't remember the date. But we were
February 26th.
Thank you. We were able to attend an Eagle Scouts induction ceremony. And I'll be honest, because it was one of those emails that I got, and I just was like, I didn't actually know what an Eagle Scout was. So I thankfully had my husband, and I said, there's this event, like, I don't know if I should go to it. And he was floored. He was like, that's such a high honor. That's amazing to have so many young people being inducted into that at once. And I think for me, I was about to type the email out and say, oh, I would love to be a part of, celebrating these young men. And it's not all men anymore either. And so that was something that I really appreciated, found an eye-opening learning, and was just endlessly inspired by the next generation of youth that we have here in Edina. So it was really, really thrilled to be able to attend that. And if I'm invited back again, I will bring my daughter because I left saying I would love to have her involved in something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay, good. I thought I'd read the name of those 7 Eagle Scouts. Member Agnew raised a really important issue here, and that is that think of all the stress kids have been under, young people have been under the last few years with the pandemic and remote learning, and sort of the mental health aspects of it have been really a challenge. And then when you think about somebody going through all of the extra effort in that already difficult time, to do something extraordinary like become an Eagle Scout and all the elements that are involved in attaining that honor. I really have to congratulate with all earnestness these 7 people. Anders Bergman, Zachary Holmes, April Musel, Rowan Nordine, Aaron Pence, Ryan Spangler. Aaron Pence, incidentally, is Allison Pence, who used to be on the Community Health Commission, her son, Ryan Spangler, and Miles Van Norman. So congratulations to all of those Eagle Scouts. It was really quite a ceremony, as Member Agnew mentioned. And then we did State of the Community. Everybody was able to be there. I think maybe you were out of town, possibly, I think. But the high point for the State of the Community, at least one of them for me, was the League of Minnesota Cities had a contest, if I were mayor for the day, for grade school kids. And this was a statewide contest, and there were 4 contest winners. One of them was from Edina, over at Highland School. Aviana Fedig, and we had her come to the meeting. They picked her up in a fire truck at Highland School and brought her out to Braemar. And she gave her presentation of what she would do if she were mayor for the day as part of the State of the Community address, and it was really a wonderful part of the event. And then, of course, the emphasis was around everything we've been doing from a climate standpoint, and it was labeled Edina a brighter shade of green. So that was nice to be able to present that with the superintendent of schools. And then last weekend I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors leadership meeting. There's about 50 mayors around the country on that leadership team, meeting on issues that a lot of the things that we see come through boards and commissions that we end up addressing, at a board and commission level. So for mayors, the leadership team ends up looking at some of these issues of our time and thinking about the annual meeting and the context for that. So Saturday, we spent almost the entire day talking about public safety related issues that affect our citizens and our police officers and their respective mental health. And then we talked about addiction issues in so many of the states that are south of us, both with respect to opioids and then also the threat and now the presence of fentanyl. We talked about gun violence. We had the top cop there from the U.S. Justice Department, and we had other folks there as well. We had the head of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation that came to talk about what had happened in Memphis and gave us a detailed description on that. So that led to a conversation at length about excessive force. And then we heard about some of these other things that are affecting America, where hate has come comfortably out of hiding with respect to Jewish people in particular. And I think our Human Rights and Relations Commission on their Stop the Hate event in May is going to be addressing that issue. And then the impact on the planet where we live, things that people are doing in the front line of climate change. So there were Florida mayors that were talking about some of the things that they were doing, dealt with immigration, just a multitude of topics over that, what amounted to a 2.5-day period, and then came home Monday afternoon. I would say, just like if you asked the League of Minnesota Cities what's the most difficult challenge for cities across the state of Minnesota, they'd say mental health. And all across the country, I would say there's this pervasive mental health challenge that has resulted in the creation of really, you could say, a variation of it's the new Great Depression. Because there are data around that show that 72% of people in America are angry and they're upset, and life just isn't right and normal the way they knew it to be, and it gets expressed and manifested in many different ways. California talked a little bit about, it's an extraordinary statistic. They've got 12% of the nation's population and 50% of the homeless population in the United States in California, trying to deal with that. The mayor of Huntington, West Virginia, town about the size of Edina, 1/10 of his population has an addiction issue. either opioids that they were addicted to early on when that epidemic started, or fentanyl. And they talked about how a couple of grains of fentanyl now is so lethal that the death rate is just extraordinary. I think it was something like 5 people per day. We talked about workforce. We've got 1.7 million people a year retiring and 1.0 million people coming into the workforce. And we talked about that in the context of the CHIPS Act and all the people that we need, 90,000 people a year to come in and work in the semiconductor industry. And we're working on that in Minnesota to try to get some of these businesses in here. But we can't ignore the fact that we need the workers with the skills to be able to do those jobs. And they don't have to be 4-year degreed people. They don't have to be PhDs. Some of them can be from 2-year colleges and be part of that workforce, and they're really good paying jobs. So those are some of the things that we kind of discussed over that 2.5 day period, Saturday, Sunday, and then half the day yesterday. So thanks for approving that travel. It's important to be part of it, and I like working on these issues locally, regionally, statewide, and nationally. And you're always bringing home best practices and information that helps us. And one data point around public safety was talking to the mayor of Tampa, who was their former police chief. They've reduced juvenile crime related to auto theft by 90% through a couple of tactics that they're using. One is called, I forget what it's called, isolation, or I don't know. They check on kids. It's like, you're going to be in school or you're going to be at home, and we're going to be checking on you. You're going to have mentors. And they've got a series of different things that they're doing, but it's really been a success. So those are some of the things that we worked on and touched on. And then at night you finally get out of the hotel. So you wake up in the morning at 75 degrees. Well, big deal. You're going down to the 7th floor to the conference center and going to work, and you come out at night and you go out for dinner with people and have a social time, and that's important too, to build those relationships around the country. So I think the first day I sat next to the mayor from St. Louis on one side and the Oklahoma City mayor on the other side, and then yesterday morning the mayor of Kansas City was on one side and the mayor of Fresno on the other. So you really develop some nice personal relationships with people from around the country that you feel you could call if you had an issue that was pertinent to what they're working on. So that's about it for me.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you for that report, because it's so important. When we're facing these issues, they seem so big or Edina-centric, and to hear that these are issues that are faced in communities all across the country is really helpful, because we can get ideas from other people and we can also get a sense of the size of the problem. So it's not something that we're creating, it's not something that our citizens are creating, it's something that we as a nation are facing. And so I thank you for the details, but also for just bringing us into context with other cities. I think that's really important for our work. So
yeah, thanks. And I know you all will come home with great reports too from the National League of Cities meeting, which I think is equally important for you to be going to for the very reasons that Member Jackson just expressed. So that's it for me. That cause anybody else to have any further comment? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
We got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Agnew, to adjourn the City Council meeting for the City of Edina on this March 7th, 2023. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.